All right. I'm so excited to welcome Jill and Kathleen to Green Biz. Rumor has it it's their first Green Biz, so please give them a warm welcome when you see them out there. And I will introduce them properly, but before I do, I wanted to set an intention for our next 15 minutes together, which is actually not about this moment in sustainability. And we're going to hear a lot about that this week, a lot of panels about it. Joel gave us some context. But why not this moment? Sometimes it's hard to see clearly in the moment. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. I'm going to tell you a quick story. So I was up on this stage 3 years ago. At that time, as Katie said, I was leading sustainability at Allbirds. And I was so excited to talk about our effort to label all of our products with their carbon footprints. We published the methodology because we wanted everyone to do it. We wanted carbon footprints to become as ubiquitous as nutrition facts on food. This effort, by the way, was largely inspired by this woman to my left. And we hoped it would catch on and spread really quickly. I can't say that it did. There was some initial excitement, but eventually, to me at least, it felt kind of like crickets. A year after that, I had left Allbirds, and a year after that, this past fall, I was in New York for Climate Week. And to be honest, I was feeling a little bit disillusioned about the hollow commitments and the lack of progress. And I actually took a break to go buy some new running shoes. And I went to a store, and I was looking at the rack, and I picked up a pair of Asics. And I went to check the size on those shoes, and I was like, this couldn't be an 11. And it turns out that was the carbon footprint of that pair of shoes. And I can't tell you how much relief I felt in that moment, how much of a sense of like, okay, this does actually add up to something, even if you can't see it all the time. And the idea for this panel was born, which is to show you all that progress is happening, even if you can't always see it, and that sometimes you have to look outside of your company or your own experience to find that. And I can't think of two better stories to illustrate that point than Jill and Kathleen. Jill over here, as Katie said, has been in this profession for 30 plus years. She needs no introduction, but she started this work back in the late 80s at Patagonia, went on to lead their sustainability efforts, went on to lead organizations like Blue Sign and SGS, and now is leveraging all that experience to help other companies do sustainability. And then along comes Kathleen, years later, starting at Reformation in 2014, so over 10 years ago, and her title is the CSO and VP of Operations. So she's doing not just sustainability, but she's running the factory, she's opening retail stores, and embedding that practice throughout the company. So we'll start with a bit of where we started versus how it's going. And we'll start with Jill. I think you started in 1989 at Patagonia.
Correct.
You were in the fabric department, testing and materials. Paint the picture for us what it was like then and how you started working on sustainability.
Sure. Thank you, Hana, and thank you to Green Biz for this. And I've worn these too if I get too far down memory lane to reel it in. We don't want to go down that far. But yes, 1989, so 35 years ago, I entered the industry, and I was a testing technician in a quality assurance lab. And pretty quickly from there, went into development because we were a tiny little company, you had to do everything. And in 1991, Patagonia did a pivotal study of looking at what we did internally. And prior to that, we were known environmentally, but it was really about giving money away, not what we were doing internally. So that really set us on the track of internal work. And though it is my first time at Green Biz, I do remember when Joel McCower sent out a paper newsletter in the real mail. And we all initialed the top corner after we read it and passed it on to our colleague, because it was before email and before the internet. So if you think your jobs are hard today, think about that for a minute. We had to figure out how to manage this work globally through faxes. And maybe an expensive phone call if it was really important, but it was not that frequently. So I have a long history. I've sat in a lot of different chairs, a lot of different seats over the years, but it was really the looking at our materials that put me on the sustainability journey. And then it grew from there into all sorts of things. And one super quick story to your shoes and the carbon footprint was organic cotton, which I was really involved in as we were converting our cotton to organic, which everybody thought we were nuts, and we had to explain to our supply chain what it was and how we found it and all this stuff, again, without the internet. And then a few years later, I'm watching TV near Christmas time, and there's a commercial for Walmart and their organic cotton pajamas. And I was like, whoa, it's hit something big. And so it's really fun. And I think you're right, Hana, to really look at beyond where you're sitting today for these ripple effects that do come out.
And how was that different from your story when you started decades later?
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about this morning as a group, and in some ways I was able to leapfrog on not just what it meant to have sustainability in your title, but then actually tactically how you do that work, how you do that materials transition. So unlike Jill, I've always had sustainability in my title, which is just different. Come with that skill set, that background, but then trying to apply it in kind of a novel space. So for me, I was an outsider for fashion, and had a really interesting opportunity to figure out bringing some of that naivete on what's possible, what's the normal playbook, and bring some of that sustainability problem solving, I know that came already in the keynote, while also then really taking some of the tactical work and asking for help. So called friends at Patagonia, called friends at Eileen Fisher and other brands that were doing it right, and frankly asked for mentorship and asked for support, from everything to how to build a team, what's the right org structure, to suppliers in common and everything else. And so when it came time for Reformation to source our first virgin cotton material, sourcing organic was pretty easy. It was a box to check, because most of the mills would have fabric qualities with organic certification. You still needed to do transaction certificates and assurance and everything in the background, but at that point, because of the work Jill had done in Patagonia, that was wildly mainstream. What was then the challenge for a brand like Reformation was saying, what's next? What does innovation look like? How do you as a brand influence broader supply chain transformation? And so, we've been investing in regenerative agriculture. Our first regen cotton project was blockchain enabled and had fiber trace technology, right? So it's like this idea that all of this is built on the work of those ahead of us, and how do we keep working forward, to your point, to really realize progress within the industry and within our teams and the broader industry.
Yeah, and I don't want to miss this big point, because we're all from the fashion space. This audience is so great because it's across many industries. But I just want to rewind a little bit. So organic cotton did not exist. Jill was trying to source even conventional cotton, but to do so was faxing suppliers in Asia to try to find it. Saw this need that actually cotton is really bad for the environment in production from a water toxicity standpoint for workers. And how did you even go about solving that problem back then?
So not only did organic cotton exist, organic didn't exist. And even when we introduced our first product, we thought about, what do we call it? Do we call it non-conventional cotton? Do we call it chemical-free cotton? Well, that doesn't really make sense because we're putting dyes and finishes. There's a lot of chemicals used there. organic, the name didn't have any equity. It didn't have any meaning in society yet, really. And so we really went through this nomenclature of what do we call this? So we did a lot of things. We took tours of fields. We met farmers. I went to agricultural conferences where there were bodies that were doing early days certification. And I looked to see where were they certifying? Are they in a cotton growing region? Can I talk to you? Do you certify cotton? Could you introduce me to your farmer? Mind you, this is really unusual for the apparel industry that typically buys maybe 6 or 7 steps beyond the growing of the fiber and all the different pieces in there. And so I also had a book from the International Federation of Organic Agricultural Movements, or IFOAM, known, and I would go through the list, like who's organizing, certifying cotton, and fax them and hope to get a reply. So it was really like boots on the ground trying to do this and traveling to different places to try to find where this was happening. Then it was education of the supply chain, because I would go, and again, now we had this very linear supply chain. So I'd go to my agent, who would go to the garment manufacturer, who would go to the knitter, who would go to the spinner, say, I want organic cotton. And the spinner says, what's organic cotton? And it came like the game of telephone. And we went back and forth like this several times. I was like, could we just form a circle? This is going to be a lot faster, which was also really, really controversial because everybody had their profit margin along the line, and they were nervous that they would get cut out if they divulged their sources. So that took a lot of trust building, a lot of relationship building, say, no, 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 I know what you do, I value it, but if you let me talk to the spinner, it's gonna go a lot faster. And it did. So then I was introduced to the spinner, and it was then a much quicker process. They knew how to buy cotton from all these countries. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just trying to find it. And we learned a lot in those early years. But most important, I would say, finding partners that are willing to work with you. Not all of them will. Some of them walked away from us. We had to walk away some very, very good vendors. They eventually came back once they saw we weren't going to change our mind. But find those relationships and don't be afraid, like Kathleen said, dive in, meet people, ask for help, and talk to your suppliers. They know their business the best, and they're going to be able to help you innovate. And in kind of this heavy time of compliance and data, and we need to get back to this innovation of sustainability. And that, I have to say, I feel really lucky when I came into the industry because it was all about innovation. We didn't know what we were doing, but we just kept trying things, and it was really, really exciting and really fun. Really hard, but fun. And we've sort of lost that spirit a little bit because we're weighed down by compliance and data and legislation that's coming. And so the challenge I would say to everybody is, look, but you guys all have the data we were dying for in those early days. If only we could get primary data to do X, Y, Z, whatever it was. Now that's possible. And so use it, but think about how you leapfrog like Kathleen was able to. How do you use that data to move into a new space of innovation?
Yeah. And what year did you start trying to move towards organic cotton?
1992.
92.
92 was our first product.
And then Reformation never even sourced conventional cotton.
We never sourced conventional cotton. Yeah, we didn't source cotton to begin with. We did vintage and dead stock. And then when it came time to source new virgin fibers, we were able to set a pretty high bar for what was even acceptable, what would meet our fiber standards. So yeah, we're probably a pretty unique brand founded in 2009, but never had conventional cotton even in our supply chain. Again, our base bar was organic, and then how do you keep pushing forward? What does next generation fibers look like? What does regenerative agriculture look like, which we'll talk about in a number of sessions, I know, for the next few days. So really taking that forward, the torch forward that Jill started to say, again, how do you keep pushing for innovation? What does the lowest impact, what does regenerative look like in these landscapes, in these communities? And what is the role of brands and ultimately introducing that demand?
Yeah, to the end where you've launched blockchain-enabled regenerative wool.
Yeah. I mean, pretty incredible to see what is actually possible. And it doesn't mean that hard work stops. We also have to, hit the pavement, go to see suppliers, push for things that aren't possible, aren't the check the box on the order form. So I think that's also important to recognize. Is I think so much of what we're trying to talk about today is what's your role as a CSO, right? It's still our job to set that vision that inspires and to push for more and better, and to do that deep engagement to see what's possible. It's just a little bit easier with email and Google Meets with suppliers halfway across the globe, right? But those conversations are still being had, and that work and discovery is still really critical to find the opportunities for innovation. Innovation is like a shiny word. It's great to say, but what does it actually look like in practice? And I think, frankly, a lot of it is exactly what Jill did to bring around the organic transformation. Really getting deep into the supply chain.
Yeah.
Try not to look at any kind of your businesses as a limitation. Over the years, I've heard, but I'm too small. I mean, Patagonia, I used to joke to my Nike colleagues, I'm like your shoelace sales sample order, my whole production for a year. So when you're little, you can be nimble and you can get in there. When you're big, you have influence and orders behind you. So size is just one end of the spectrum, but think about where you fit uniquely into your suppliers and use that, because every one of you sits in a unique spot that way.
Yeah, as we've talked about this, like you've all heard the saying, like progress doesn't happen or change doesn't happen in a straight line. And when people say that, you kind of think of a zigzag or an up and down. One model that I really love is that change is like a slinky, where if you look at it this way, it looks like you're just going around and around. And that's kind of what you both are saying in terms of like, yes, we're doing actually the same thing of talking with our suppliers about how to drive new innovation, but it's at a totally different level of innovation. And so back to the slinky, if you look at it the other way, you are actually moving forward. And I think that's really important to remember at a moment like this when it can feel like we're going backwards, to be able to look longitudinally and see how progress happens over time. We are coming to a close here already, but if everyone here takes away one thing, I really hope it's a renewed sense of confidence that we are moving forward, and that sometimes to see that kind of progress, you have to just look outside of your own company, your own tenure, your own industry, just as these women have done. And we all met at venues like this. We've been to conferences together around the world. Jill was one of the first people I met in the back of a bus at a conference in Hong Kong. And she helped somebody who didn't know anything about this space how to get into it and learn. Any last thoughts from you ladies?
I think just more on that. One of the reasons I think I'm here at Green Biz is Hana wanted to challenge me a little bit, because I was feeling like a little bit of what's the point of convening, right? If we're going to be here talking about how hard it is, talking about the imperfect data, the laundry list of things that a CSO can say are the challenges of the work today. What is the point? Are we moving past it? Are we building connection and community to actually solve those problems together? And so I think that's like the energy we're taking into the week at Green Biz. Really think about what's the point of being here? What's the point of convening? You have like a great, like Jill, that's just sitting at a lunch table with you. How do you ask the right questions, go deeper, and hopefully walk away with a little bit of that challenge and energy to keep that slinky moving, right? And to keep things progressing.
And quickly, just to add to that and to wrap it up, is that Kathleen said it earlier, ask questions, ask questions, never stop. And you might bug your supplier, they might say no, you're like, but no, there's gotta be a way, what if? And I drove suppliers crazy all day long in the supply, just, like, Jill, no, we can't, but no, that guy can do that yarn, I think it'll work. And then the people sitting around you, like Kathleen said, sit with people you don't know, don't sit with your colleagues that you're gonna talk to next week. Meet new people, find out what their specialty is. I guarantee you there's an expert for just about everything in this room. Find them.
All right, thanks, Jill and Kathleen, and thank you, everyone.